Kia ora and welcome. My name is Mark Treadwell and this is a short video clip introduction to chapter 14 of the book The Future of Learning. In this chapter we're starting to look at this idea from James Nottingham of the pit. Now James came up with this idea of the pit as a learning pit. It's the development of a model that came out of a business model, but he built this notion of a pit. That when the students go into the pit, they're going into a learning pit. And the notion really seems to connect extraordinarily well, far better than I ever imagined, with young people. They love the notion of going into the learning pit and trying to get out of the learning pit. But what we've done, we've said to the whole process around learning, is that we're going to carve that pit out of the competencies. In other words, the substrate, if you like, of the pit are the competencies. That's how critical the competencies are to the learner taking agency over their learning. So if we want, long term, if we want to have young people who are lifelong learners but are independent lifelong learners, that independence comes from their capacity to manage their own learning rather than that being managed by the teacher. So the teacher's role, as we spoke about earlier, is becoming more of an educator role. And that's a much more profound role. It's an empowering role, okay, for making sure that the young people that leave our schools are actually able to go into society and continue their learning on their own, in groups, whether it's mandated by their employer or just out of their own personal desire to continue to learn. So this notion of a pit is a very clever one. But before we enter the pit, we have to draw on another idea from Carol Dweck. And Carol Dweck has written a lot of really good work around what is our mindset when we go into that learning pit. What does that actually look like? And so we can have a mindset, for example, and many young people do have this, that I can't do maths. If you go in with a mindset you cannot do maths, then you're not going to be able to do maths. The fact that you want to do maths helps you. It doesn't guarantee a good outcome necessarily, but it helps you going in there to have an optimistic approach. But also we need a whole bunch of capabilities around doing mathematics. Right? So it's not a guarantee. Part of Carol's work also looks at how we encourage young people. And quite often we hear teachers and parents and people in the community saying to children, "You're just absolutely wonderful." That is a meaningless statement, because the child has got no idea what they're wonderful at or what's made them wonderful. And so we have this idea that young people want to be praised. Praise is something we need to use very judiciously, very carefully. Because in fact, if we start praising the person rather than what they do, the child gets confused as to what actually matters. And what matters actually is what they can do. So if we see a young person who is running around a track and sort of beats their best time, we don't go up to them and say, "That's fantastic, you're wonderful." We say to them, "You know what? All that training has paid off. You've actually improved your time by 3 seconds." In other words, what we're praising is the effort they put in. And that's really, really critical. We have to reconstruct how we give praise as educators and as parents and in all roles we have with each other. We have to identify what it is they did well, so they know that that investment of effort was actually what drove their result. A child that stays at level 5 in a reading program or a maths program or a science or a phys ed program, stays at level 5, is not improving their learning. A child that's gone from level 2 to level 3 has improved their learning. So which one is the better learner? The person at level 5 because they're higher, or the person that's gone from level 2 to level 3? And it's the person who's made the greatest improvement in their learning. That is good learning outcomes. It's not a benchmark of you should be a 5, you should be a 6, or you should be a 7. It's how much have we improved our learning. And so this whole notion of the pit and our mindset is explored in chapter 14. And we look at to see what makes up that pit and how do we get out of the pit. Because up to now, the child may go into the pit, but generally speaking, the teacher is sitting on the other side jumping into the pit to rescue the learner by constructing ladders for them. And now what we're doing is we're calling down to them, asking them questions. So as the educator, we're standing on the edge of the pit, driving their learning and encouraging their effort they're putting in and where the effort is placed appropriately. So these two notions of the pit and our mindset are congruent, but the pit is dug into that substrate of the competencies. Have a read of chapter 14 and have a look at the references, and then we'll come back and we'll look at chapter 15, where we'll look at the next stage in the learning process. Thank you very much.